we had Farad on the channel, and I thought, what better occasion than the magnum opus, coming to screens after a wait of 6 months, almost. We when we ended the PS1, especially people who have not read the novels like us, people in North India who are not aware of Ponniyin Selvan, which is an integral part of Tamil culture. For us, this was a long wait, and finally most of the things were answered. A few things still unanswered, probably because they can only do so much in a 5 hour, 5.5 hour cinema, to contain every aspect of that book. That's not possible. So to talk on detail, I've got Farad in the house today from Popcorn Reviews. He has been very instrumental on his own channel as well, and I think he put his review yesterday. So welcome back on the channel, Farad, and how's it going?
Thank you for having me. Going all well, and really was also looking forward to Ponniyin Selvan 2, especially how it had ended. I think
Yeah.
Ponniyin Selvan 1 had ended in a very, you can say, on the edge, so to say, and that really did have a impact of curiosity as far as Ponniyin Selvan 2 was concerned. Yes, the response for part 1 also wasn't as expected in the north of India, probably because, as you rightly said, that the culture, etc., was slightly not familiar, even as far as the history textbooks are concerned. So you're more centered around the Rajputs and the Mughals and the Awadhs. So all that era that is there, this is the Cholas, which was before that. So I think that was the main differentiating factor, and it was a breath of fresh air. I can definitely say that.
Yeah, breath of fresh air, not just in terms of that Mani Ratnam. Last year he made a this huge comeback, so to say, with PS1, and then not just his cinema that we were kind of missing, because he hasn't made anything since Ravan in Hindi, especially. So freshness or breath of fresh air, not just in terms of that, but also proper cinema. Like we were starved of this kind of proper cinematic storytelling. We have had a few ups and downs, like Pathan was a huge success, but in terms of that classic cinematic storytelling, which the likes of Mani Ratnam do, like no other can. So that was, I think, that was something that was only kind of achievable in cinema, right? uh, and that's where my next question comes. Like, a lot of people have this notion that would this have been better off as a web series with multiple seasons instead of theatrical release. But my counter to that is, because it's Mani Ratnam cinema, because it's larger than life and this grand scale, the stature of it that we experience in IMAX theaters, it couldn't have had the same effect on OTT. So what's your take on that?
Well, I still feel that given its source material and given the text by Kalki, by the same name, Ponniyin Selvan, it is quite a lot of things to take in as a viewer for the medium that is there. So
Hmm.
if you're making it for a 5.5 hour film over two parts, there are going to be sections that you have to, despite it being a magnum opus, agree to that point as well. But despite it being a magnum opus, there would be certain things that you would need to, speed dial. You need to just skip through. And I
Hmm.
think that is where a web series would have been a good idea also. And I wouldn't mind, making a web series again, all over again for that. It's okay. You made a film on it. You can still make a web series on it. I mean, there's nothing wrong in that. And I would love to see that because especially the part one that was there that had a lot of, you can say, the character motives that were there, the
Hmm.
politics of that era was established, and it was easy to get lost as well, given the era that was there, which because you're not familiar with. So a little bit of reading was required, I would say, definitely. And I think web series would not have been a bad idea. It's still not a bad idea. You can still make it. Mani Ratnam has made it for the big screen. And one more thing I wanted to share, that I was watching an interview of Karthi of Film Companion. The entire crew was there with Anupama Chopra, and he had said that there were 5 a.m. shows that were there in Chennai, and we are not in Chennai, we are in Bombay. But 5 a.m. shows in Chennai, normally he said that you would see youngsters getting into that space in the 5 a.m. or the 7 a.m. shows. But here there were elderly people who were, visiting the cinemas, which means it was such a generational thing. It was that scripture, that literature was passed on from one generation to another. And I think that itself was a fascinating thing. And that's why it's a huge success to all the cinegoers who are, getting to witness that magnum opus on screen. It was a dream project of Mani Ratnam as well. And glad it transpired. It was amazing.
and and to top it off, all these people would have known the story all this while.
Absolutely.
They knew, they must have read the book, for all these years they were aware of what this is about, and yet just to see the cinematic version of it, how Mani Ratnam would have adapted the book from Kalki into a two-part film. Like that just speaks volume of not just the how good the book must be, but also the trust that they have in Mani Ratnam's ability to tell a story in his own way.
Absolutely.
So I think that's, yeah. And so, as you said, like, you wouldn't mind a web series after the movie has come. So would you mind the same people involved, like same actors doing a web series, or would you want like a fresher take on it? Maybe somebody else, like some Mani Ratnam could be like the executive producer, and he could supervise some other director and some other actors coming onto the
So
fore.
this is an interesting question because I was reading about it, and there was this fan survey that was there, or something that I did come across while doing a little bit of research before watching Ponniyin Selvan Part Two. This was already when I'd watched Part One, and it was that every
Mm.
actor that is there in this film, they have been aptly cast according to their traits that are there, the character traits that are there. Like, for example, Karthi is this a charmer, and he has this
Mm.
little cheeky kind of a humor as well, that he does share on screen, very well portrayed. Jayam, on the other hand, Jayam Ravi, who plays Ponniyin Selvan,
Mm.
he had a certain calmness to his character, but authoritative as well.
Yeah.
Vikram, on the other hand, had to be eccentric. That character had to be eccentric and impulsive. All these characters, even the ladies that are there, Trisha, Aishwarya Rai Bachchan,
Mm.
almost outstanding actors and outstanding performances. And one of the reasons for that was because the character traits were, aptly marked into. So I wouldn't mind watching them, in the web series as well. I mean, that would definitely not be,
Yeah.
getting over in one season. It would probably require like at least 7, 8 seasons, if not more. And
Yeah.
because of the text, and that would really mean that you would get to dig deeper into their characters, which is, dare I say, for
Yeah.
a lack of a better word, I wouldn't say it was absolutely on surface, but it was still not as deep as it would otherwise be on a web forum. So yeah, why not? The same
So,
cast would do wonders. You've already done the casting, that means.
yeah, I mean, it's and with such an ensemble cast, it's so difficult to pick your favorite, because everybody has such an influential role, such a pivotal role. You can't, and everybody performed it so well. Like, it's no one you could say was like an odd one out or something like that. And but still, somewhere, that chemistry between Vikram and Aishwarya Rai Bachchan, and I mean, especially that scene, that let's not give out any spoilers, but that important scene where they face off. I mean, that was probably the high point for me in the movie, because it's shot so beautifully, it's acted out so beautifully. The music then adds another dimension to it. And I mean, only only Mani Ratnam could have done justice to an ambitious project like PS1 and 2 to put together. And only he could have, because these people have also worked together in Ravan, in Tamil and Hindi versions both. So I think, because of that kind of, having worked in the past also must have helped. So what was your highlight or takeaway from PS2?
Mine was absolutely that as well. And I'm not even joking. And Keshav and me have not discussed this off screen. So this
Yeah.
is, I think we
And
are completely agreeing to this.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I have also not seen your review yet. So it's, even if you mentioned it in that, I'm not coming from there. It's just absolutely organic.
It's organic, absolutely organic. Mine was exactly that scene, typically because of two things. One was that besides the bits and pieces of the flashbacks that you did see Vikram and Aishwarya in that one frame, this was the only other time that they were together in the entire film. That is number one.
Hmm.
And number two being that their relationship in the film was, and this is by the way on the normal. This is the character of Nandini is not there in history, by the way. This is
Hmm.
restricted only to the novel. So sticking to the novel, the relationship between Aditya and Nandini that is there, I think that was one equation that potentially had the power to shape the entire history of the kingdom, their relationship.
Hmm.
So that scene had to be powerfully written and powerfully performed as well. And it's very rarely that you see that, everything comes together. The two performers are on point, the setting is on point. I'll let you speak about the music about that, but everything was on point in that scene, and it was so beautifully expressed, where the vulnerabilities of the two individuals came out, the emotions were there, there was rage, there was a little misunderstanding also, there was vengeance definitely, but there was also love somewhere, and I think that is something that absolutely stole the show. That was one of the iconic scenes, I would say, in recent times of Indian cinema. Absolutely.
I'm going to pose a very difficult question to you and people who are watching right now. If you had to pick one out of the two scenes, this one and in the first part, that interval scene when there's this major reveal. I think we can talk about the part
Yeah,
one
part one we can. Yeah,
a little bit with spoilers. Yeah. So when he basically kills, her
father,
so to say, the father figure. So if you had to pick
Veerapanya.
out of these two scenes, like, because that scene for me was the takeaway from part one, because that was so impactful, and that was such a major high point in the film that completely, twisted and turned the whole narrative. And here in this one, this was another important one. So if you had to pick one, in terms of, how it was enacted, how it all came together, or which one left more impact on you?
It would definitely be the part two one where both of them come face to face with one another, because the emotional baggage that they have been carrying all this while. Second thing is, I did have certain technical issues with that interval block that was there in part one. It had a few jump cuts. If you see that, Aditya is holding a sword and Nandini is at his feet, pleading for the life of her father. And father is already injured and on the deathbed. And you see a sword, being swayed, almost like flashed. And that is the scene. So the editing of the scene, I did have an issue. It was not a one take scene, which did not have that kind of an impact on me. But as far as this is concerned, everything came together. I mean, the editing was on. There were no
Mm,
jump cuts that were there. There were wide shots. You could see both of
mm,
them. You could see both their reactions and expressions in that one scene that is there in part two. And I think that really stole the thunder. Typically, because the film also began on that note, so the makers were also very
mm.
self-aware that this relationship is actually the emotional core of Ponniyin Selvan too. It is the emotional
Yeah.
core that is there, which is why they gave a little backstory of their childhood and how they actually fell in love. how they fell out of love. That first 15-minute prelude that is there, that I think did
Yeah,
act as a foundation for that scene, and it was very well paid
yeah.
off in that
I
pre-climax.
think that was, yeah, that was very important in the context that so I saw an interview where Maniratnam said that even if somebody has not watched part 1, and if they are watching part 2 directly, they can still enjoy it. And I thought because of that, the first 15 minutes where they have this backstory, and then they do a little bit of a recap of part 1, so I think it it wouldn't be as clear as having seen part 2, but still, they kind of joined the dots here and there to simplify it. Now, as a non Tamil speaker or non South Indian, we being North Indians, how were you able to connect with the whole thing now? Since Vivek has put that these two parts are partially fictional, it's not 100% Kalki. So people
Yeah, it is,
down
and I
south who,
wanted to get to that as well.
yeah, so that's why I'm joining the two things together. That people down south would have known the whole story, and they would have known what is fictional, what is fact. Now for us, who are not aware properly, as a North Indian or as a non Tamil person, were you able to like connect 100% with what was being told to us, or were you able to like nitpick? Okay, this seems a little fictional. Okay, so all these kind of things were coming to your mind.
So this is an interesting thing that you said. The reason being that I did watch part one with a blank slate. Absolutely, Ponniyin Selvan one. I knew very little about the history. I would have to admit about the Cholas and the Pandyas that are there.
Mm.
But I was able to follow what was going on, and that was so fascinating in itself. Despite there being criticism about you being lost in the film, I wasn't lost, and I'm sure you weren't as well, Keshav. And the character motivations and the politics were such that I went and just read about the Cholas after the film.
Mm.
And this was before PS2, Ponniyin Selvan 2. So I was actually a little aware of where the story is going to go. I did my little bit of research, and I would also like to say that the ending of the film is different from that of the book. The book has
Okay.
a different ending. The book by Kalki, Ponniyin Selvan, that book name, it has a different ending, and there are a couple of characters, which is why I would say it was a web series. Would have been an interesting thing because a couple of characters here have been subdued, which is why the ending may have changed, in the film. I did not mind the change in the film as well because the character motivations were such that you could not have gone the way of the book because you
Mm.
weren't focusing on some of the other characters that were there. Should I give a spoiler? Should I tell you what the ending was or no?
Not
Of
yet.
the
I think
book at least.
it's
Okay.
it's still
Okay,
relatively
still too
new.
early.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, okay. So then the ending that was there, it was not the same. But I did not
Okay.
mind the ending of the film, considering that the characters which were not focused on, they did not get that importance, which was in the book. Let me put it
Mm.
this way, without giving any spoilers. So that is something that I really liked. But I would have also, now that I'm also curious to know that how the film would have eventually looked if it was the ending of the book. So I
Mm.
knew the beats of the film. I would not, shy away from admitting that because
Mm.
I did a little reading of the Cholas and the Pandyas.
Yeah, it's interesting because why I'm asking this non Tamil or North Indian angle is important. It's because they have
Yeah,
been born and brought up in that culture where this is an integral
absolutely.
part of their life, right? So of course their excitement is different from ours is more in the cinematic way. We are excited to see Mani Ratnam back, and after PS1, just like how Bahubali 1 ended, so people were eagerly waiting for Bahubali 2. So same way, we were also waiting for part 2 of this because so many things had to get resolved for us. But why I asked that question is because, in a sense that as Vivek also said, uh, we haven't got 100% of the book in the film. So
Yeah.
you could then feel a little shortchanged or left out, that okay, what about the other details in the book, because you can tell only so much in 5 hours. So because of that, I just felt that web series could have been a better idea. But because Maniratnam, he's such a cinema person, so to speak. So he would have wanted this to be presented to the audiences the way it's meant to be, the way cinema is meant to be. So maybe that's where probably it would have edged the OTT decision. Like because so I'll tell you, before going, I revisited PS1 on Amazon Prime, and it just didn't have the same effect which it had on me, when I watched it on big screen last year. And I recommend. So I went with a friend, and he hadn't seen part one, so he saw part one on OTT, and then he came directly to theater after that. And I'm sure, like, it would have been such a huge stark difference between the two experiences that he had in the same day within a few hours. So now, before we end this, let's get to the things that probably you didn't like, or they were not up to the expectations as you would have expected. Like, was there anything that fell short of your expectation?
Yes, it was. I feel that the finale act that was there, the finale battle sequence, that just did not land for me. It
Okay.
was a little underwhelming, and it was not the way it was shot, but it was the way, again, it was edited. It had far too many jump cuts in
Hmm.
that full sequence that was there. It did not have that kind of impact which otherwise it should have had. And I think that was one thing consistent in all the action sequences across the two films.
Hmm.
The action sequences were a little bit of a letdown because the editing was off for me. For me personally, I felt the editing was off. It was not so much to do with the choreography of the action sequences, but it was more to do with the editing. And I think that
Hmm.
is something that the film did lack a little for me, even in part two. But part two was definitely better than part one, although I would not like to look at it like part one and part two. It's one for me. But
Yeah.
for a lack of a better comparison, part two was definitely more moving as far as because the equations were set, the world
Hmm.
building was set. You needed to go on with, and this was much more of a moving drama. But yeah, the flaws were with the editing of the action sequences and the finale.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there were lesser amount of action sequences in this one, I thought, than part one. And as you said, the moving, so because so much had to be revealed in the part two, that's why I think it had more moving parts. And because so many things had to come to a resolution by the end of it, that's why, like, you could say part one had a couple of places where the film was going a little one dimensional, or you were reaching a saturation point, especially, again, I'm bringing that North Indian reference because we are not aware of it. So I was bored a couple of times in part one, but here in part two, everything just kept happening at such a nice pace, and that was probably due to the editing. But then again, as you said, editing was again something that kind of fell apart in those action sequences, which couldn't really hold your attention as you would have expected. And the finale act, was it not as impactful as you thought it would be, or was it like you would have wanted, since you had read the book, you would have wanted the different ending?
No, the ending here was all right. I did not have a problem with the ending, typically because the book had so many other characters that were there, and they were, featured in that. But here,
Hmm.
because of a limited time space, if they had ended it with the book, then probably it would have been a lesser impact, further lesser impact. But
Okay.
here, the ending was fair. It was a good ending, but it was the action sequences that were a letdown, and so the impact did not come. That final knockout punch should have been there, which did not come.
Yeah, so basically the main course was good, but at the end, that
It deserves, yeah.
yeah, the yeah, that's the right analogy here. Now, coming to the departments, as you said, so music wise, so since we had seen part one and loved the stuff that Rahman sir did in that, and a couple of my friends and batchmates from college are also involved in this project. One of them did the mixing mastering, the other one was a music supervisor on the whole project. So kudos to
Nice.
them. And because, and it's not just because it's Rahman, but also anyone who would have done the music. It was such an integral and huge part of this film, not just songs, but score as well. I think score was even much more impactful than songs,
Absolutely. Yeah.
because stay with you because of their melodic value. But score was something that, even if there was a kind of a light scene, it would do, music will do the heavyweight lifting there. So in that sense, absolutely, especially that scene that we discussed between Nandini and Aditya Karikalan. So and coming to now let's get you give your 2 cents on another department. What about the cinematography? Because I was absolutely floored in part one, and part two was like icing on the cake.
I think the cinematography looked beautiful. It was wonderful because it was shot in real locations with good light. And that is
Yeah.
something that was missing in the Adi Purush teaser that was there. You can't put the whole film on VFX, which is why PS1 and PS2 did score. It scored because it was shot mostly in live locations. The
Mhm.
sets were good. I think the costumes were excellent here. If you see the costumes, it was outstanding costumes. The jewelry that the cast was wearing, the
Mhm.
costumes, everything was on point as far as the art department is concerned and the costumes department is concerned. It was outstanding here, and I
I
did
think
not feel any problem with that. Yeah, it was
another
outstanding.
factor that added to the cinematography was color grading, because that is
Color grading. Yeah, yeah,
such a huge part of Mani Ratnam films always, that the colors he chooses to represent something. Like, there is a tonality to all his films, and the color tone, the palette of colors that he has chosen for this were absolutely magnificent. uh,
absolutely,
and yeah,
hundred
like
percent.
real locations, although in PS1 I had a little bit of a problem with
Yeah,
VFX. Like, you could tell in a lot of scenes that in the background it's the green blue screen or the green screen that's doing the trick. So you could kind of point it out. Good VFX is when you can't really tell the difference,
can't point.
but there you could. And I'm glad that part 2 had lesser those sort of shortcomings, if you will. And other than that, like, we already discussed that it's so difficult to pinpoint one performance in particular. Everybody did such a stellar job. All the main cast, even the supporting cast, everything was on the spot. So yeah, all in all, I think at least it felt like, after coming out of theater, that yes, that was worth my 3 hours, that was worth my $300. So that's where, that whole, when you said it was a breath of fresh air, that's where that comes into play. That if you are going to the theater, you should feel like I had the theatrical experience. Because at times we feel like, oh, this I could have waited for a month or two and seen it in my house on OTT in my comfort zone. But films like these, they are meant to be properly experienced. So did you watch IMAX?
No, I did not watch the IMAX film.
Oh, you should have. If you are planning to go again, you should definitely. I watched both the part one and part two in IMAX. And what did you watch in Tamil or Hindi?
I watched it in Hindi, unfortunately. It was the Hindi dub. I wanted to watch it in the original language, but the subtitles were an issue. There weren't any subtitles. Majority of the area where I'm right now, not right now,
Hmm.
where I was right now, the weekend, and so I had to settle for the Hindi dub. I'm sure the Tamil one would have been something else as well.
No, but I have to again, I have to pinpoint this. So I watched part one both in Hindi and Tamil. And I have to say, a lot of times, Hindi dubs are very bad, but this time especially. So a friend has done the Hindi dialogues for the movie, and I
Oh,
was. And since you have also seen both parts in Hindi, I'm sure you wouldn't have felt how we feel usually in South Indian Hindi dubbed films, that
yeah.
didn't really connect with us. But in this one, I think they did a fab job. Not just the dialogue writer, but also the dubbing artist. Whomsoever did the Hindi dialogues for all the
I
characters.
think there were big names there, by the way, Keshav.
Yeah, yeah,
Aditi Rao Hydari was involved, yeah.
yeah, and
Avinash Tiwari was there.
yeah. So that's why and Gulzar Saab writing the Hindi lyrics again. That
Manoj Joshi
that's
was also
something.
there. I think he was Nambi's voice.
Yeah. Oh, he did a fabulous. He was my favorite of the lot
Fabulous job.
because is it only me, or he actually kind of looks alike as well? Like they have a similarity in their
Jairam,
looks.
yeah.
So that was absolutely spot on. That choice to dub that character, it suited so well because they also look alike in a way. So so yeah, we have a couple of comments. I loved the first hour, but second part is too rushed. So I think why people would have felt that is because, as we spoke earlier as well, there's only so much you can tell in 5 hours, and then the second half you're telling is the second half of the second part. So that's where that's the last one fourth part of the whole storytelling. And of course it felt rushed because they had to resolve so many things. And I'm sure that if this comment is coming from South India, they would have known the whole context, so they would have felt it even more rushed than we would have. He follows it up with another comment. I love the story of Nandini and Aditya. That is the only thing that saved the film. I think that's an understatement. I mean, there
That's
are more.
harsh.
Yeah, there are more likable things in the film. It's not. It's if he would have said that Salman Khan saved kisi ka bhai kisi ki jaan, that that comment would have made sense. But this is not this is not making any sense. So I'm not sure, but he's entitled to his opinion. And he has another one. He says the arc of Ungurali and Samudam is not complete. You wanna comment on that? Because
Yeah, that is the one that is there in the book, by the way. Yes. So you said no spoilers, so I did not want to spoil it, but yeah, that was the track that was eventually going to blossom into that ending that was there that did not come in the film.
Mhm.
And that let's keep it at that. I think there are
Yeah,
many people who've not yet watched it,
yeah.
so I'll keep it there. But yeah, that was the track that
Mhm.
uh, would eventually have ended it the way it did in the book.
Well, so I think we have covered most of it. Just before we leave, so Mani Ratnam had this ambitious project for so many years, and finally, it has come to life, and he has made it happen, and both the parts are out now. So at the end of it, do you think it's as he would have visualized it as it is, or you know he could have done something better? Or because in terms of length, 2 hour 45-minute runtime is already kind of
On the
you're
higher side.
yeah, like you're flirting with the people's patience. So in terms of length, I don't think there is any contest here, but in terms of storytelling, could he have avoided something and added more layers to something that should have been even more detailed? Like he would have been satisfied with the final product.
I don't know that. I don't think I'd be in a position to say that. Probably one thing, if I look on the hindsight, and this is just an opinion. I mean, this need not have necessarily impacted anything, but because there was so many things to resolve in part two, probably some of that could have, marked their presence in part one as well. I mean, it
Hmm.
could have slightly been, drawn in part one, which was only the world building and only the character introductions that were there. that was one aspect probably. But when I look at it from start to end, I don't think that would be much of an issue as far as the storytelling is concerned.
Hmm. Yeah, so final comment, let's take that. What's your thought on Jairam Ravi's character in PS2? I felt they should have shown some Sri Lankan moments of him.
That's again, yeah, I would say so. But I think he was, to be in all fairness, he wasn't one of the main, characters that were there.
Hmm.
When I say main, with all due respect, I say the core group of Ponniyin Selvan. I think the core group did involve Jayan Ravi, Vikram, Karthi, and the ladies that were there. Shobita again did not have much to do in part two, if you notice. Trisha was there, Aishwarya Rai Bachchan. These were the core characters that were there. Up to an extent, even Rahman, who played the uncle of
Hmm.
Vikram in the film, Prakash Raj. These were the main that were there involved in the trajectory of the film, so to say. Nambi was also there as far as part one is concerned, but not so much in part two. Um, which is why I would say that to explore more character arcs and explore more characters, web series would have been the ideal option. It would have absolutely been a, so to say, I mean,
Could it
you
could
never
it
know,
have
right?
been?
Game of Thrones, probably.
Yeah, that was my next comment. Could it have been India's answer to Game of Thrones?
May well have been, still can be. No harm in still making it, exploring it.
Still can be. I mean, that like how we felt with Gangs of Wasseypur, that's India's answer to Godfather, or things like that. But again, okay, let's take PG's comment. I didn't like the way Madhurantaka coming back to Arun Modi without a big reason.
Yeah,
It's going
I
very
would say,
specifically.
his character, I would tend to agree to an extent with that comment. That's a fair comment, at least, that the switch in his character that was there, I think that was far too quick, you can say, far too fickle, which is why I feel that, again, back to the same point, a
Mhm.
web series would have enunciated that experience a little more.
Mhm.
With, and when we say it is a little hurried, it is a little hurried because of these reasons that they do not allow the audience, the viewers, the time to absorb as to what changed. You know, that is the I would tell that's a fair comment. I would say it's
So
not
we'll
wrong.
finish. We'll finish with this last note. Okay, he says I think the idea of making just in two films is a bad idea. So even if they didn't want to make a web series, even if they were hell bent on getting it into a theatrical experience for people, do you think three-part series? I mean, three-part film would have been a better idea instead of 2 hour
Not at
45
all.
minutes of two films. You could have done three films or 2 hours each, or 2 hour 15 minutes.
Not at all. I wouldn't agree to that at all because film is such a medium that it's a little fickle. People do forget it. So when you're pushing it to the third, three is always a crowd, right? Two is okay. Even Bahubali, for that matter, could have also been a third part. Why is it not a third part? Because I think anything more than two in a continuation story would not work so much in the film medium. But in a web series medium, it would work. So that is the difference. I don't think the film would demand a third part with the same story. Yeah, you have seen many parts that are there, franchises which have the third, fourth, fifth part, but those are independent films that are there. If you
Hmm.
see, you need not have watched the earlier parts. But
Hmm.
rarely will you see a continuation of a film that is, actually getting continued with the same storyline that is there. So yeah,
Well, but then there are no rules, right? And people like Mani Ratnam,
there are no
they are
rules.
flag bearers of experimenting and bringing new stuff. So I mean, who knows? He could have tried, and it might have been a success, or people would have liked more because of detailed nuances. But anyway, that's we leave that to people. If you they could also give their opinion in the comment section below. So on that note, I would like to thank Farad for taking out his time. It's we are almost into 40
So,
minutes, 40th minute now, and we thought we'll do a shorter one. But it was fun talking cinema after so long with you, and hopefully we'll see more of you this year than we did in recent times. Also, by the way,
pleasure, pleasure. We'll try.
On 30th April, just a couple of days ago, my channel completed 2 years, and you were a part of, the first video uh, uh, at the inception of my channel, when we did Joji and the Great Indian Kitchen. So that was fun, and time flew. 2 years, as it's good to have you.
Congratulations, Keshav.
Yeah, thank you. And it's kind of like, celebrating that, the second anniversary with you, because I was inactive on the channel for 2 weeks. So coming back around the same time, with you on this live chat is, again, kind of like, deja vu. But yeah, thank you to everyone who was watching. If you have come from Farad's channel, subscribe. And if you're watching from my side, and if you haven't seen checked out Popcorn Reviews, go and check it out. The name is in the title. You can just click on it. So thank you again, and we'll